It's kind of black power.
And when I say thug life, I mean that shit. Because these white folks see us as thugs. I don't care what y'all think. I don't care if you a lawyer, if you a man, if you an African American, if you whatever the fuck you think you are. We're thugs and niggas for these motherfuckers. And until we own some shit, I'ma call it like it is. How you gonna be a man in the store? No. And we have to go by 5 different houses ain't a man in either one of them motherfuckers. How we gonna be a man? How we gonna be African Americans? We out here thugs. We thugs. And we niggas until we set this shit up. Trust me when I tell you.
Young black males out there identify.
So I'm going to show you a letter, and this letter verifies that at least one person believed that the CIA or that the government was behind trafficking narcotics in America. The letter comes from Senator Gary Hart, and it's sent to Senator John Kerry. Now, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, John Kerry was the previous Secretary of State, and this letter comes all the way from 1991. So, you know, it's just crazy to me that we have somebody that's still involved in government this many years later. And 1991 is a long time ago. And it just shows that these rat lines, they don't go away. And so we have Compton being patrolled with 6 helicopters. And, you know, when I was down at Compton the other night, I talked to him about back in the day. And back in the day, it was constant police helicopters around Compton. It was just nonstop. And they said they don't miss those days because it was just so annoying to constantly have helicopters flying overhead. Well, what were those helicopters doing? Constantly flying overhead. You know, clearly they were trafficking narcotics. And we even learned that about the helicopter that crashed near the school district, and there were drugs found in the warehouse at the school district. So we look at, you know, Compton, we look at the origins of death row records, and it starts to become no surprise. Freeway Ricky Ross told me that he was there when Michael Harris wanted to meet with Suge Knight, and he was cellies with Michael Harris. Well, Freeway Ricky Ross was working for Bandon. Bandon is the Gary Webb source that Bandon had told him about the CIA putting drugs out on the streets of America to raise money for the Contras. And we had the Bolin amendments, both of them, that forbade Congress from funding the Contras, and so they had to get money from a source. What was the source? It was drugs. And so that's a pretty clear connection. Now, if you have Michael Harris, who's funding Death Row Records, and Michael Harris is connected with Freeway Ricky Ross, who's connected with the CIA, doesn't it just make sense that Death Row Records is actually an extension of the CIA? And that would also explain why all of these investigations that come to naught, investigations that go on for years, and money laundering, drug trafficking, murders, all kinds of things surrounding Death Row Records, and yet there's never an arrest, there's never a conviction, and that's why they're treating Suge Knight so harshly now, because Suge Knight knows where the origins of all of this stuff happened. And so here we are, we have this letter, which you'll see here, and the letter is a corroboration of what was happening back in the day. And the fact that we can't find a birth certificate on Reggie Senior, I mean, doesn't it start to look like maybe there was some kind of a CIA connection with the Wrights, which they had claimed all along, that they had leverage and that they had power and that somehow they were affiliated with the CIA. It is starting to look like that. Now, I'm not saying that the CIA had anything to do with killing Tupac Shakur. I'm not saying that the FBI had anything to do with killing Tupac Shakur. I think that's a stretch. Did they know what was going down that night? It's highly likely they did. They were surveilling Tupac and Biggie at the times of their deaths. And so, what do we really know? I mean, they probably turned a blind eye to it. They're sure that they didn't shed any tears. And I'm sure that they weren't upset by the fact that these men were murdered, but were they complicit? We have yet to establish that link. That link I find very elusive, if it exists at all, and I'm of the opinion right now that it doesn't exist unless somebody can show it to me. Somebody can show me the smoking gun. I wanted to do a shout out to the crowd. Thank you for everybody that contributed to getting intel and information on Reggie Senior and on Sean Puffy Combs. This is how the crowdsourced investigation works. We get a lead on a piece of information, and then we work hard to verify that information. So we put out this information. Doesn't mean that it's true, it means it needs to be verified. And the crowd, 3,000, 4,000 people strong now, are in a much better position to verify this, with more eyes and ears and more reach to documents and more reach to people that are inside of Compton that can verify things in Compton than I am. And so I appreciate everybody that's in the crowd that's really trying to research this and make this thing happen. And thank you to all the people that are in Compton. And one last thing I want to talk about is I did an interview with Spinner and with Mink. Now you guys know who you are. They talked about the hyper-violence, the black-on-black violence, and I want to address what they had to say. They said, we have a ghetto here in one neighborhood, and what happens? We decide that that ghetto is in the path of development, so we displace the people that are in that ghetto. Well, they don't like the people that are in the ghetto next to them. And what does government do? Government pushes the people from one ghetto that may be wearing a different color than the people in the next door ghetto. They push them into that next ghetto. And now we have people who don't like each other fighting for the resources in the already overcrowded ghetto next door. And that's what leads to the hyperviolence. Is it by design? It's highly likely that it is. There is definitely a lot of money and a lot of power, and this money and power doesn't necessarily like the people that are in the ghettos. And I'm starting to believe that it's systemic and it is something that is by design. And we have yet to prove that, but it's definitely a premise that I'm starting to believe based on everything that we're starting to see. More later.
Or your acting, music, or the controversy that surrounds you.
Big mouth. Big mouth. I got a big mouth. Came out. I talk from my heart.
Cardinelli, Cardinesi.
Which is kind of black mouth.
And when I say thug life, I mean that shit. Cause these white folks see us as thugs. I don't care what y'all think. I don't care if you a lawyer, if you a man, if you an African American, if you whatever the fuck you think you are. Them thugs and niggas for these motherfuckers. And until we own some shit, I'ma call it like it is. How you gonna be a man in the store? And we have to use about 5 different houses ain't a man in either one of them motherfuckers. How we gonna be a man? How we gonna be African Americans? We out here thugs.
Young black males out there thinking about thug life. But I could handle it, but not right away.
Sick of this place, so I can't go to sleep. Sick of this race, and I ain't finna weep. Stomach full of beer, and I ain't gonna eat. The whole damn street just full of them sheep. Flow to the beat like toast to the heat. Toast to the street from the coast to the beach. Never be a pop, but I'm close when I speak. Never gonna stop when I flow to the streets. Never had hope, so say the drama. Had to sell dope just to pay for karma. Imagine being